Big news, kind of, or not really, depending on who you talk to. The Justice Department has announced they are no longer going to use or contract with private prisons, period. They did an investigation which turned up the exact same thing that every other investigation into the matter has turned up, which is that private prisons, by and large, are less safe than government-run prisons. They are less effective at providing correctional services, which is almost funny to read. Who thinks prisons are in the business of providing correctional or rehabilitative services at this point, right?
Yeah.
And that it basically just doesn't make sense to contract with private prisons. So that's good news. I like that. The problem is this doesn't apply to that many people because this decision, number one, affects only federal contracts with private prisons. Most prison inmates nationally are not in federal prisons, they're in state prisons, and this decision by the Justice Department does absolutely nothing to impact the fact that state governments are still using private prisons. And the other thing is, we've talked about this many times. I don't know, Jason, if you're aware of this, but people often like to talk about the huge importance of eliminating private prisons. I agree, incarceration should not be for profit, but only about 8 or 9% of inmates nationally are in private prisons. And that's one of those things where, as progressives, we want to inform, and the right position is to be against private prisons. But let's also not overstate how many people are even in private prisons. I don't know if it's shocking to you that only 8 or 9% of inmates are in private prisons.
But 10% of the world's largest prison population, that's still probably a significant number, like even compared to worldwide, that's probably still more prisoners than many people even have.
In raw numbers, there is no doubt that the private prison population of the U.S. rivals the total prison population of many countries, no doubt about it. But let's remember exactly what the scope of this is. So, and lastly, we've talked a little bit, Lewis, about how immigrations enforcement has these deals with private prisons where they will hold people pending deportation or pending hearings in private prisons. And it's a really big moneymaker for the private prisons. This federal decision does not impact immigrations related detention in private prisons. So yes, it's a victory in that it is the right decision. It's a victory in that it might start getting us in the right direction, but it really is impacting a tiny portion of inmates nationally.
Yes, still a good thing, though, because these prisons are terrible. And maybe this will eventually lead to some type of federal mandate against private prisons. And I'm sure the thought of a private prison to many people listening in other countries, it just doesn't even make sense.
No doubt about it. Libertarians are sort of split on this. This is one of those issues where libertarians will sometimes split and some will go off to the kooky recesses of the internet. Some libertarians are sort of against the concept of prison. Some of them actually say we should go back to when you commit a crime and you, as the perpetrator, are required to compensate the victim, which basically means if you have a lot of money and you figure out what the price is for a rape, you can say, hey, I can afford 10 rapes a year and I'll just pay people off and that's that. That is one libertarian view. Others are sort of against the prison industrial complex, not because they're opposed to making incarceration for profit per se, if the market will bear it, as they like to say, but because they just think the entire system of how people are brought to justice, the police system, the legal system, it's all totally illegitimate. Those people I also don't agree with. And then you have the more reasonable libertarians who say, you know what, if we are going to take away someone's liberty by imprisoning them, that is such a serious responsibility and big thing for the government. You should never attach a profit motive. That is a libertarian-esque belief that I can actually get behind.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. And if it's justice and that's what we do.
Yeah.
Right. Let's not have it be for profit. And please read about the conditions in some of these for-profit prisons.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Jason? You seemed like you were anxious to get in there.
I was just going to say, it seems like, I'm not sure where they stand in education, but it seems like, should be the same for many of these things. Education should be nonprofit as well, really.
I've been reading a lot of the comments online and many people reacting to this by saying, great, now let's move on to healthcare and education, two other institutions that should not be made for profit. That's something we've talked about pretty often.
Gamefly is sort of like Netflix for video games. They have over 8,000 new and classic games for Xbox One, Xbox 360, PS4, PS3, Wii, and a bunch of other platforms. And you can play as many games as you want for one monthly fee. And if you find some games you want to keep, You can buy them for a low used price. There's never any due dates or late fees, and our audience can get a free 30-day trial at gameflyoffer.com/TDPS. The games are shipped directly to you with return envelopes included. There's no contracts, and you can rent games through the mobile app. Get the free 30-day trial for the David Pakman Show audience and support our show by going to gameflyoffer.com/TDPS.